I trained my girlfriend like a dog to obey me. Here's how. Okay, so this is gonna sound insane, but hear me out. 6 months ago, my girlfriend told me I wasn't affectionate enough and she was gonna leave me if I didn't change. Now our relationship is better than ever. Like, legitimately perfect, and I know exactly why. I'm a software engineer, 25. I've been with Jess for about a year and a half now, and up until 6 months ago, things were fine. I'm not really an emotional guy. I don't do the whole feelings thing very well. My parents were kind of cold growing up, very practical, very Midwestern about emotions. You don't really talk about that stuff, you just handle it and move on. So that's how I am. Reserved, logical, I solve problems, I don't really sit with them. But I do have this dog, golden retriever named Maple, and I love this dog more than I've loved most people in my life, if I'm being honest. She's 4 years old, I got her as a puppy, trained her myself. She's perfect, smart, affectionate, just a great dog. And with her, I'm a completely different person. I get excited when I come home and she's there wagging her whole body. I'm constantly petting her, scratching behind her ears, talking to her in this ridiculous voice. I give her treats for basically nothing. I'm obsessed with this dog. With people though, with Jess, I'm just not like that. I kiss her when it makes sense to kiss her. I tell her I love her at appropriate times. I'm not cold, I'm just measured. That's the word I'd use, measured. So 6 months ago, Jess sits me down on the couch and she's got this look on her face like she's about to break up with me. And honestly, I kind of thought she was. She goes, "We need to talk about us." I'm immediately in problem solving mode. What's broken? How do I fix it? She tells me she loves me, but she doesn't feel loved by me. She needs more affection, more physical touch, more enthusiasm, more presence, I guess. She said she feels like I'm just going through the motions with her. Like she's a routine I'm maintaining instead of a person I'm excited about. And here's the thing, she wasn't wrong. I did kind of treat our relationship like a system. Date night every Friday, text her good morning, kiss her when I leave for work. It was all very structured because that's how my brain works. Structure makes sense to me, emotions don't, but she's sitting there telling me she needs more or she's going to leave, and I'm panicking because I do love her. I don't want to lose her. I just genuinely don't know how to be what she's asking me to be. I told her I'd try. I told her I'd work on it. She seemed skeptical but hopeful. We hugged. She cried a little, and then she went to bed, and I just sat there on the couch thinking, how do I fix this? Here's what I kept coming back to. I'm great with Maple. I'm affectionate with Maple. I'm excited to see Maple. Why can't I be like that with Jess? But I didn't make the connection yet. Not really. I just knew I was screwed. So I did what any desperate person does at 2 in the morning. I Googled it. How to be a more affectionate boyfriend. How to show more emotion in a relationship. How to be excited about your girlfriend. And listen, I know how the internet works. I know about algorithms, but I clicked on one video and then another, and before I knew it, I was deep in this whole rabbit hole of dating advice content. Most of it was garbage, really surface level stuff about complimenting her more or remembering anniversaries. But then I found this one guy. He had gold teeth, like permanent gold fronts, very confident, kind of aggressive in his delivery, but he was saying things that actually made sense to me. He called himself a dating coach, but the title card said he used to be in sales and marketing. The guy understood psychology. He was talking about what he called male-female dynamics, how men and women communicate differently, want different things, respond to different approaches. And a lot of it was standard stuff I'd heard before: be confident, lead, don't be too available. But he also got into this concept called kino, kinesthetic touch, basically casual physical contact to build comfort and attraction. The idea is that you're not just grabbing her hand or going straight for a kiss. You're creating this escalating pattern of touch that builds familiarity. A hand on her lower back when you're walking through a door, playing with her hair while you're talking, touching her arm when you laugh at something she said. And when he explained it, it made sense. It wasn't manipulative, it was just intentional, being purposeful about creating physical comfort. He talked about frame control, which is basically staying calm and confident, even when she's emotional, not getting reactive, being the stable one. He talked about reading body language, about noticing patterns in behavior, about understanding what someone needs even if they don't directly say it. And I'm watching all this thinking, okay, this is actually useful. This is tactical, I can do tactical. Then he got into this other section, a newer module he called it, and this is where it got weird. He started talking about behavioral conditioning, Pavlov's dogs, operant conditioning, positive and negative reinforcement, the actual psychology of training behavior. And his whole premise was this: women respond to the same behavioral conditioning as any other mammal. It's just biology. You're not manipulating her, you're speaking her biological language. He broke down studies. He talked about dopamine responses, about pattern recognition in the brain, about how humans are wired to respond to rewards and consequences just like any other animal. And listen, my first reaction was, this is messed up. This guy's literally comparing women to dogs. But then he kept talking. He said, you give a dog a treat when it does something you like and it learns to do that thing more. You praise your kid when they clean their room and they learn that cleaning their room gets them positive attention. You smile at your girlfriend when she texts you something sweet and she learns that sweet texts make you happy. It's all the same mechanism. We just don't like admitting it because it sounds reductive. And the more he talked, the more it kind of made sense. Like, he wasn't saying women are dogs. He was saying all living things respond to their environment based on patterns of reward and consequence. That's just neuroscience. He said, if your girlfriend is happy, engaged, and feels loved, does it matter how you got there? Or are you going to let your pride about being natural ruin your relationship? I sat with that for a while. Then I thought about Maple. I trained Maple myself using positive reinforcement, treats when she sits, praise when she comes when called, excitement and affection when she's calm and well behaved. And Maple is the happiest dog I know. She's confident, she's affectionate, she trusts me completely. What if I just did that with Jess? I know how that sounds. I do, but I was desperate. And this guy was making a pretty convincing argument that this was just applied psychology. The course was $300. I bought it at 2:30 in the morning and didn't tell anyone. I watched the whole thing over the next 2 days, took notes, built a framework in my head. The basics were this: positive reinforcement, reward the behavior you want to see more of, immediately and consistently. Physical touch is a primary reward. Humans respond to touch the same way dogs respond to petting. It releases oxytocin, builds trust, creates positive association, enthusiasm, show genuine excitement for small things. It makes people feel valued. Treats, literal treats, small gifts, favorite favorite snacks, little surprises. They create positive associations with you and with certain behaviors. Timing. The reward has to come immediately after the desired behavior, or the brain doesn't connect them properly. Consistency. If you're inconsistent, you'll confuse the pattern and it won't stick. The guy recommended keeping a small notebook to track patterns. What behaviors you wanted to encourage, what rewards worked best, what timing was most effective. So I did. I started a note in my phone, titled it Relationship Goals in case Jess ever saw it, and then I just started applying it. Day 1, Jess came home from work. Normally I'd look up from my laptop, say, hey, and go back to what I was doing. This time, I got up immediately. Big smile, walked over and hugged her like I hadn't seen her in a week. Hey, how was your day? I missed you. She looked surprised, but in a good way. She smiled and hugged me back and said, it was fine. Long. I missed you too. I kept my hand on her lower back while we talked, guided her to the couch, sat close to her, kept touching her casually while she told me about her day, hand on her knee, playing with her hair. She kept looking at me like she was trying to figure out what was different, but she was smiling the whole time. That night, I made dinner. I don't usually cook, but I knew she loved this one pasta thing I make. Made it without her asking. Kept checking in with her while I cooked, touching her shoulder when I walked past, asking her opinion on things that didn't really need her opinion. After dinner, she was doing dishes and I came up behind her and just hugged her from behind. Kissed her neck, told her I loved her. She kind of melted into me, said, what's gotten into? You? I said, what do you mean? She said, you're being so sweet today. I just said, I'm trying. You said you needed more. She turned around and kissed me, and we ended up having sex right there in the kitchen, which for the record had not happened in months. Day 2, I bought a bag of Reese's Pieces, her favorite candy, kept them in my pocket. Jess made a joke that actually made me laugh. I gave her a Reese's Piece, just pulled it out of my pocket and handed it to her. She laughed. What is this? I said. You're funny. You deserve a reward. She thought it was ridiculous, but she ate it and kept smiling about it for like an hour. Later that night, she was stressed about something at work. I could see her getting anxious, hunched over her laptop. I went over, started massaging her shoulders, told her she was going to be fine, that she was great at her job. When she relaxed, I gave her another Reese's Piece. She laughed again. Are you training me? My heart stopped for a second, but she was smiling. She thought it was cute. I said, I'm rewarding you for being amazing. She kissed me. We had sex again. I made a note in my phone. Physical touch plus verbal praise plus small treat equals extremely positive response. Continue pattern. By day 10, Jess was a different person. Or maybe I was a different person, but our relationship felt completely transformed. I was greeting her every day like Maple greets me when I get home. Actual enthusiasm, hugs, questions about her day that I genuinely listened to. I was touching her constantly. Not in a creepy way, just in a you're in my orbit and I want to be close to you way. Hand on her leg when we watched TV, arm around her shoulder when we walked, playing with her hair when we talked. I kept Reese's Pieces in my pocket at all times. If she did something I wanted to encourage, being vulnerable, communicating openly, initiating affection, making me laugh, I'd give her one. It became this running joke between us, but I could tell she actually loved it. She started checking my pockets when I got home. I was praising her constantly, not fake stuff, but genuine observations. You're so good at reading people. I love how you handled that. You look incredible today. And the results were insane. She was happier than I'd ever seen her, more affectionate, more engaged. Our sex life went from once or twice a week to almost every day. She started texting me more during the day, started planning dates, started telling her friends about how I'd completely changed and how great things were now. Her best friend Claire came over one night and Jess was gushing about me, about how attentive I'd become, how thoughtful, how affectionate. Claire kept looking at me like she was trying to figure out what I'd done. At one point, Jess got up to go to the bathroom and Claire said, so what happened? I said, oh, what do you mean? She said, Jess said you were like a different person overnight. People don't just change like that. I shrugged. She told me what she needed. I listened. Claire didn't look convinced, but she didn't push it. By week 3, I started getting more sophisticated with it. I bought a clicker, one of those dog training clickers that makes a sharp little sound. The idea, according to the course, is that you can use the clicker to mark positive behavior even when you're not in a position to immediately reward it. The click becomes associated with the reward, so eventually the click itself triggers the positive dopamine response. I started clicking it when Jess was in another room, then immediately coming in and being really affectionate. Or I'd click it right before giving her a treat or compliment. After about a week of this, I could click it and she'd immediately smile even if she didn't consciously know why. Pavlovian conditioning. It actually worked. I was keeping detailed notes now. What situations triggered stress for her? What types of touch she responded to most? What times of day she was most receptive to affection? What phrases made her feel most valued? I had it down to a science. My roommate Tyler found the bag of Reese's Pieces in my jacket pocket one day and asked why I was carrying around candy. I told him, they're for Jess. He said, like, she asked you to carry them? I said, no, I just give them to her sometimes. He gave me this weird look. Why? I probably should have lied. But Tyler and I have been friends since college, and I was honestly kind of proud of what I'd figured out. I said, it's positive reinforcement. She does something I want to encourage, I give her one. It's behavioral conditioning. Tyler stared at me. You're conditioning your girlfriend? I said, I'm rewarding positive behavior. There's a difference. He said, dude, that's what you do with a dog. I said, it's what you do with any living thing. Kids, employees, partners, everyone responds to positive reinforcement. Tyler said, does Jess know you're doing this? I said, she knows I give give her candy. She thinks it's sweet. Tyler said, but she doesn't know you're like training her. I didn't like the way he said training. It sounded worse than what I was doing. I said, I'm not training her. I'm being more attentive and intentional. That's what she asked for. Tyler said, by treating her like Maple. I said, by applying proven behavioral psychology. And it's working. She's happier than she's ever been. Tyler looked like he wanted to say more, but he just shook his head and walked away. I made a note to be more careful about who I told. By week 5, I was running on pure confidence. The system worked flawlessly. Jess was happy. I was happy. Everything was perfect. I started watching more of the course content. There were advanced modules I'd skipped initially. One of them was about negative reinforcement. The instructor, gold teeth guy, explained it like this. Positive reinforcement is great for building desired behavior, but sometimes you need boundaries. Sometimes you need to discourage behavior that's damaging to the relationship, and you can't just ignore bad behavior because that teaches her that her actions don't have consequences. He talked about subtle corrections, not punishment, he emphasized. Correction. A brief, mild negative stimulus associated with an undesired behavior so the brain learns to avoid that behavior. He said, you don't yell at your dog when it does something wrong. That just makes it afraid of you. You use a correction, a sharp sound, a brief negative sensation right at the moment of the behavior. The dog associates the behavior with discomfort and stops doing it. Then you redirect to a positive behavior and reward that. He showed examples. Spray bottles with water for cats, citronella collars for barking dogs, vibration collars for training. Then he got into what he called discrete correction devices for adult relationships. I'm not going to lie, this part made me uncomfortable at first. He was talking about shock collars, modified versions designed to look like jewelry, thin, elegant, designed to be worn as a necklace or bracelet, remote controlled. He said, she won't even know it's happening. She'll just start to associate certain behaviors, nagging, withdrawing, being dismissive, with this vague discomfort, and she'll naturally stop doing those things because her brain is wired to avoid discomfort. He pulled up testimonials. Guys saying their relationships had completely turned around, that their girlfriends were more respectful, more attentive, more engaged. One guy said, I'm not using it to hurt her. I'm using it to communicate boundaries in a way her subconscious understands. I closed the laptop. That was too far. That was actual manipulation. That was messed up. But then over the next few days, I kept thinking about it. Jess had been perfect lately, but there were still these little things. She'd get on her phone and tune me out completely when I was trying to talk to her. She'd snap at me when she was stressed, even though I was just trying to help. She'd dismiss things I was excited about, nothing major, just little patterns that bothered me, and I thought, what if I could just smooth those out? What if I could set those boundaries without having to have some awkward conversation about it? The guy in the video had a point. I don't yell at Maple when she does something wrong. I just give her a correction in the moment and she learns, and Maple trusts me completely because I'm consistent and fair. What if it really was just another tool, used responsibly at the lowest setting just to establish boundaries? I told myself I was just going to look at the products just to see what they were. I found one online. It was designed to look like a rose gold choker necklace. Delicate chain, maybe 3 millimeters thick, thin enough that it looked like expensive jewelry, not like any kind of device. The product description said it was a discrete training tool with adjustable intensity levels from 1 to 10. Remote controlled, range up to 30 feet. The contact points were tiny, hidden on the inside of the chain. Unless you were looking for them, you'd never notice. It cost $400. I stared at the listing for probably 20 minutes. This was crazy. This was way over the line. But then I thought about how perfect things had been, how happy Jess was, how happy I was, and how this could just make things even better. Smooth out those last few rough edges. I thought about the guy in the video saying, if your relationship is better and she's happier, does it matter how you got there? I bought it. It arrived 4 days later. I opened the box in my car before going inside. It really did look like a nice piece of jewelry. I checked the contact points. They were barely visible. Just 2 tiny metal dots on the inside of the chain. The remote was small, about the size of a key fob. 2 buttons. One to activate, one to adjust intensity. I tested it on myself first, obviously. I held the necklace against my forearm and pressed the button on level 1. Nothing. Level 2. A tiny tingle. Barely noticeable. Level 3. A sharper sensation, like static shock. I decided I'd never go above level 2. Just enough for her to notice something, not enough to hurt. Our anniversary was coming up, 6 months since the talk. It was perfect timing. I took her to her favorite restaurant, nice place, kind of fancy. We got drinks, split an appetizer, talked about how good things had been lately. After dinner, I pulled out the box. Jess's eyes went wide. What is this? I said. Just something I saw and thought of you. She opened it and literally gasped. Babe, this is gorgeous. I said, you like it? She said, I love it. This is too much though. This looks expensive. I said, you're worth it. She immediately put it on, pulled out her phone to look at herself in the camera. How does it look? I said, perfect. She took a bunch of photos, sent them to her friends, kept touching it gently, admiring it. I had the remote in my pocket. I didn't plan to use it that night. Just wanted her to wear it, get comfortable with it. We went back to my place, had sex. She kept the necklace on, said she didn't want to take it off. Perfect. Over the next few days, I didn't touch the remote. Just let her wear the necklace, let it become part of her routine. She wore it every day. Showed it off to Claire and her other friends. Posted a photo on Instagram thanking me for being the most thoughtful boyfriend. I was waiting for the right moment. A moment where a small correction would actually be useful. It happened about a week later. We were at my place watching TV. I'd had a long day at work and I wanted to tell her about it. I started talking and she was on her phone scrolling Instagram, barely listening. I said her name. Jess. She said, but didn't look up. I said, can you put your phone down for a second? I'm trying to talk to you. She said, I'm listening, but she very clearly wasn't. I felt this spike of frustration. This was exactly the kind of thing I wanted to address. The dismissiveness, the lack of presence. I had the remote in my pocket. I've been carrying it around for days just in case. I thought, just level 2. Just a tiny correction. She'll feel a little static shock, won't even know what it is, and her brain will associate being on her phone while I'm talking with mild discomfort. I pressed the button. Jess screamed. Not like a startled yelp, a full terror scream. She grabbed her neck with both hands and fell off the couch onto the floor. I jumped up, my heart exploding in my chest. Jess, what's wrong? She was gasping, her eyes wide. I can't feel my arm. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I dropped down next to her. What's happening? What do you feel? She was hyperventilating. Something's wrong. I can't call 911. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking so hard I could barely unlock it. She was crying now, full panic. I think I'm having a stroke. I can't feel my left side. Something's really wrong. I called 911. Told them my girlfriend was having some kind of medical emergency. Gave them the address. The dispatcher kept asking questions I didn't know how to answer. Is she breathing? Yes. Is she conscious? Yes. Does she have a history of seizures? I don't know. What were you doing when this started? We were just sitting on the couch. I didn't tell them about the necklace. I didn't tell them what I'd done. The ambulance got there in maybe 8 minutes, but it felt like an hour. Jess was still on the floor, still crying, convinced something was catastrophically wrong with her. The paramedics came in, started asking her questions, checking her vitals. They did a stroke assessment, had her smile, raise both arms, repeat a sentence. She could do all of it, but she was still panicking. They decided to take her in. I rode in the ambulance with her, holding her hand, the remote still in my pocket like a live grenade. At the ER, they took her back immediately, ran an EKG, did a neurological exam, asked her about drug use, about any medications, about family history of heart problems or stroke. I sat in the waiting room, my whole body vibrating with terror. What had I done? How had level 2 caused that reaction? Was something wrong with the necklace? Had I hurt her? I kept thinking about taking the remote out of my pocket and just throwing it in a trash can. But what if they asked me questions? What if they needed to know what happened? About an hour later, a nurse came out and said Jess's brother was here, Marcus. I'd met him a few times. Older than Jess by about 4 years, kind of protective, never seemed to particularly like me. He walked past me without saying anything and went straight back to where Jess was. I sat there for another 40 minutes. People came and went. A guy with a broken arm, a kid who'd split his forehead open, a woman who looked like she was in labor. Finally, a different nurse came out and asked for me. She said, "We're going to do a neck x-ray just to be thorough. The doctor wants her to remove any jewelry first." My stomach dropped through the floor. I said, "Okay." The nurse went back. I sat there, my heart trying to break through my rib cage. 10 minutes later, I heard yelling, Marcus's voice. What the hell is this? More yelling, a doctor's voice, lower, trying to calm things down. Then Marcus came exploding through the doors into the waiting room. He was holding the necklace. He looked at me, his face pure rage, and yelled, "You put a shock collar on my sister?" Everyone in the waiting room turned to look. I stood up, my hands out. "Marcus, let me explain." He said, "Explain?" She thought she was dying. I said, "I didn't think it was supposed to be subtle." He said, "Subtle? For boundaries? Are you out of your mind?" A security guard was coming over. Other people were staring. I said, "You don't understand. It's not what it sounds like." Marcus said, "You were training her like an animal." My fight or flight was kicking in. I said, "You don't understand the science." Wrong thing to say. Absolutely the wrong thing to say. Marcus saw a bedpan on a nearby cart. Some patient had just used it. It hadn't been emptied yet. He grabbed it and he threw the entire contents at me. I was drenched, completely soaked, reeking of piss. People were screaming. The security guard was trying to get between us. Marcus charged me. We went down, hitting the floor hard. He got a punch in, caught me in the eye. I swung back, connected with something. We were grappling, rolling, and the security guard was trying to pull us apart, but we were both running on pure adrenaline. Marcus had grabbed the remote from my pocket where it had fallen out during the fight. He was holding it, realizing what it was. I saw his face change, saw him look at the necklace, then at the remote, then at me covered in piss. He pressed the button. The jolt hit me everywhere at once. My whole upper body lit up like I'd grabbed a live wire. The liquid was conducting the current across my skin, amplifying it way beyond what it should have been. Every muscle seized. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. It felt like it lasted forever, but it was probably only a second. I dropped, twitching, gasping. Marcus was yelling something, but I couldn't hear it over the ringing in my ears. Security finally pulled him off me. I was on the ground, shaking, drenched in piss, everything hurting. Another security guard was trying to help me up. I couldn't stand. My legs wouldn't work right. Marcus was screaming, "You stay away from her. You stay the hell away from my sister." They dragged him to one side of the waiting room. Someone was helping me to a chair on the other side. I could taste copper in my mouth. My ribs hurt where we'd hit the ground. My eye was already swelling. A nurse came out and said, "Jess wants to see her brother, not you." I just nodded. I couldn't form words yet. Police showed up maybe 5 minutes later. Hospital had called them. They separated Marcus and me even further. Took statements, asked what happened. Marcus told them about the shock collar, showed them the necklace and the remote. The cop looked at me. "Is this yours?" I nodded. He said, "You put this on your girlfriend?" I said, "I can explain." He said, "We're going to need you to come to the station." They confiscated the necklace and the remote as evidence, put them in a bag, sealed it, made me sign something. Marcus was being escorted out. As he passed me, he said, "If you ever come near her again, I'll kill you." The cop with him said, "That's enough." But Marcus kept staring at me until they got him outside. I sat there reeking of piss, my eyes swelling shut, my ribs screaming, trying to process what had just happened. My phone buzzed. "Tyler." "Dude, where are you? You were supposed to be back hours ago." I couldn't even respond. A nurse came over with some paper towels and a hospital gown. "You can clean up in the bathroom." I went to the bathroom and tried to wash off the piss in the sink, changed into the hospital gown, looked at myself in the mirror. My left eye was swollen, already turning purple. My ribs hurt when I breathed. I had a cut on my cheek from when we hit the floor. But worse than any of that was the look on my face. I looked scared, actually terrified, because I was starting to understand what I'd done. The cop came back. "Sir, we need to go." I followed him out through the waiting room. Everyone was still staring, probably going to be telling this story for years. The guy in the hospital gown who got drenched in piss after putting a shock collar on his girlfriend. As we were walking toward the exit, I passed a window that looked into the ER bay. I could see Jess through the glass. She was sitting on a bed, Marcus next to her, his arm around her shoulders. She was crying. She looked up, made eye contact with me through the window, and the look on her face wasn't anger. It was fear. She was afraid of me. The cop's hand was on my shoulder. "Let's go." I let him lead me out to the parking lot, to the patrol car. As I got in the back seat, still wearing the hospital gown, still smelling like piss, one eye swollen shut, I finally let myself think the thought I'd been avoiding for the last 2 hours. I didn't train her to love me. I trained her to fear me. And I've been so focused on the metrics, on the system, on whether it was working, that I never stopped to ask whether I should be doing it at all. The cop got in the front seat, started the engine. I put my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. And I thought, how did I get here? Update part 2. It's been 3 weeks since the hospital. I'm going to be honest, I didn't want to write this update. I've been sitting on it because thinking about what happened after makes me feel sick. But people have been asking, and I guess I owe it to everyone who responded to tell you how this played out. So here's where we are. I'm currently living in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house, sleeping in a twin bed under a poster of the periodic table that I hung up in 9th grade. I'm 25 years old. I have a master's degree in computer science, and I'm back home because my roommate kicked me out and I have nowhere else to go. Let me back up. That night at the hospital, the cops took me to the station, still in the hospital gown because my clothes were covered in piss. They put me in an interview room and made me wait for like an hour. Just me and a table and a mirror that was obviously a window on the other side. Finally, 2 detectives came in. A woman, probably mid-40s, and a younger guy, maybe early 30s. The woman did most of the talking. She put the necklace on the table between us, still in the evidence bag. She said, "Walk me through this." So I did. I told them everything. The course, the positive reinforcement, the clicker, the treats, how well it was working, how happy Jess was, and then the advanced module, the negative reinforcement, the necklace. The male detective stopped me. He said, "You shocked your girlfriend." I said, "I used level 2. It was supposed to be barely noticeable." The woman said, "But it wasn't barely noticeable." I said, "No, I don't know what went wrong. Maybe the device was defective." She said, "Or maybe you put a shock collar on a human being and it hurt her." I didn't know what to say to that. The guy said, "Did she know what the necklace was?" I said, "No." He said, "So she didn't consent to being shocked?" I said, "It wasn't supposed to hurt her. It was just supposed to create a boundary." The woman leaned back in her chair. "A boundary." I said, "She was on her phone ignoring me when I was trying to talk to her. I was just trying to discourage that behavior." They both stared at me. The woman said, "By electrocuting her." I said, it wasn't electrocution. It was a mild correction." The guy said she thought she was having a stroke. I didn't have a response to that. They asked me more questions. Where I bought the necklace, how much it cost, how many times I'd used it before, whether I tested it on myself, whether Jess knew about any of this, whether I'd done this to anyone else. I answered everything. I wasn't trying to hide anything at that point. What would be the point? After maybe 2 hours, they told me I could go. They were keeping the necklace and the remote as evidence. They said the DA would review everything and decide whether to press charges. I said, "What kind of charges?" The woman said, "Assault, maybe battery, possibly unlawful restraint depending on how the DA interprets it." My stomach dropped. I didn't restrain her. She said, "You put a device on her body without her knowledge or consent and used it to cause her pain. We'll see what the DA calls it." They gave me a card with a case number and told me not to contact Jess at all. No calls, no texts, no showing up at her place. If I did, they could arrest me for violating her rights as a victim. I said, "She's not a victim. I didn't mean to hurt her." The guy said, "Intent doesn't really matter here." They let me call someone to pick me up. I called Tyler. He showed up an hour later, took one look at me in the hospital gown with a black eye and said, "Jesus Christ, dude." We didn't talk on the drive home. I could tell he wanted to say something, but he was holding back. When we got to the apartment, he finally said, "I need you to find somewhere else to stay." I said, "What?" He said, "I can't have you here, man. This is too much." I said, "Tyler, come on. Where am I supposed to go?" He said, "I don't know. Your parents? But you can't stay here. My girlfriend saw the Reddit post about this. She knows it's you. She told me if you're still living here, she's done with me." I said, "The Reddit post?" He pulled out his phone and showed me. Someone had posted in our city subreddit. The title was, "Guy at County Hospital got caught putting a shock collar on his girlfriend." It had like 800 upvotes. The comments were brutal. People calling me a psychopath and abuser, saying I should be in prison. Someone had posted a description that was close enough to me that people were trying to figure out who I was. One comment said, "I think I know this guy. Works at a tech company downtown. Has a golden retriever." Another said, "If you know who this is, report him. He's dangerous." Tyler said, "It's a matter of time before someone connects this to you publicly. I can't be associated with this." I said, "We've been friends since college." He said, "Yeah, and you put a shock collar on your girlfriend. I don't even know you right now." I packed a bag that night, called my parents. My mom picked up. I said, "Hey, can I come stay with you guys for a few days?" She said, "Of course, honey. Is everything okay?" I said, "Not really. I'll explain when I get there." The drive to my parents' place is about 40 minutes. I spent the whole time trying to figure out how to explain this. I got there around 1 in the morning. My dad was already asleep, but my mom was waiting up. She took one look at my face and said, "What happened to your eye?" I said, "Oh, I got in a fight." She said, "With who?" I said, "Jess's brother." She made me sit down at the kitchen table, got me ice for my eye, made tea even though I didn't want any. Then I told her, not everything. I left out the clicker and the treats and most of the conditioning stuff. I just told her I'd bought Jess a necklace that turned out to have a defect and it shocked her and she thought she was having a medical emergency and her brother found out and we got into a fight at the hospital. My mom said, "A defect? what kind of necklace has electricity in it? I said, it was like a smart jewelry thing. I don't know, it was supposed to be safe. She didn't look like she believed me, but she didn't push it. She said, is Jess okay? I said, I think so. They wouldn't let me see her. My mom said, well, you should call her tomorrow and apologize. I said, the police told me not to contact her. My mom's face changed. The police were involved? I said, they were at the hospital because of the fight. They took statements. My mom said, are you in trouble? I said, I don't know yet. She looked at me for a long time. Then she said, you can stay here as long as you need to, but tomorrow you need to tell me the whole story. I went up to my old room, lay down on the twin bed, stared at the ceiling. My phone kept buzzing, messages from people I barely knew. Dude, is this you on Reddit? Are you the shock collar guy? What the is wrong with you? I turned my phone off. The next morning, my dad came into my room at like 7. He's an early riser, used to be a high school principal before he retired. Very no-nonsense guy. He sat on the edge of my bed and said, your mother told me you got in a fight. You gonna tell me what this is really about? I sat up. My ribs hurt. My eye was still swollen. I said, it's complicated. He said, uncomplicated. So I told him, more than I told my mom. Not everything, but enough. The relationship problems with Jess, the course, the behavioral conditioning, the necklace. My dad listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, you shocked her. I said, the device malfunctioned. He said, did she know it could shock her? I said, no. He said, so you put something on her body without telling her what it was and then used it to hurt her. I said, I wasn't trying to hurt her. He said, Mika, but you did. I didn't say anything. He said, do you understand what you did? I said, I made a mistake. I thought I was helping the relationship. He stood up, looked at me like he didn't recognize me. He said, you treated a human being like an animal. Your girlfriend, someone who trusted you. I said, everyone responds to behavioral conditioning. It's just psychology. He said, it's not psychology. It's abuse. And if you can't see that, you've got bigger problems than a black eye. He left. I heard him and my mom talking downstairs. Couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the tone. They were arguing about me. I turned my phone back on. More messages, but also one from a number I didn't recognize. This is Claire, Jess's friend. Don't respond to this. I'm just telling you that Jess is filing for a restraining order on Monday. Stay away from her. If you actually care about her at all, leave her alone. A restraining order. That meant it was going on my record. Potential employers would see it. Anyone who Googled me would see it. I Googled myself. The Reddit post was already the third result. My LinkedIn was the first result. My company website was second, and then Shock Collar Guy Hospital was third. I started reading the Reddit comments. Someone had figured out which hospital based on details in the post. Someone else claimed to have been in the waiting room and confirmed the story. They said I'd been screaming that it was just science while covered in piss. I hadn't been screaming, but that's what people were saying. Another comment, I know this guy. He works at Data Firm Downtown. Someone should report this to his employer. My blood went cold. Data Firm is where I work. Small software company, maybe 30 employees. Very tight-knit. Everyone knows everyone. I checked my work email on my phone. 3 emails from HR asking me to call as soon as possible. It was Saturday. HR was emailing me on a Saturday. I called the number. It went to voicemail. Left a message saying I'd seen the emails and I'd call back Monday. Spent the rest of the weekend in my room. My mom brought me food. My dad didn't talk to me. I kept checking Reddit. The post had over 2,000 upvotes now. Someone had created a throwaway account claiming to be a nurse who'd been there. They said I'd been calm and calculating even after the fight, that I'd shown no remorse, that I'd tried to explain the science of what I'd done to the police. None of that was true, or it was true but not the way they were making it sound. People were sharing the post to other subreddits, relationship advice, am I the whole, legal advice. Each one had hundreds of comments, people analyzing what I'd done, diagnosing me with various personality disorders, debating whether I should go to prison. One comment got like 500 upvotes. This is how serial killers start. He's testing boundaries, seeing what he can get away with. Next time it'll be worse. I'm not a serial killer. I'm a guy who made a really bad decision, but that's not how the internet saw it. Monday morning, I called HR, got transferred to the director, a woman named Patricia. She said, thanks for calling. I need you to come in today for a meeting. I said, what's this about? She said, we'll discuss it in person. Can you be here at 11? I said, yes. She said, good. Bring your badge and your laptop. That's when I knew I was getting fired. I drove to the office, hadn't showered in 2 days. My eye was still bruised. I looked like hell. Patricia met me in a conference room. She had another HR person with her, a younger guy who I think was there to take notes. She said, I'm gonna get right to it. We've received multiple reports about an incident involving you this past weekend, a violent incident at a hospital. Is this accurate? I said, there was an incident, yes, but it's being misrepresented online. She said, can you walk me through what happened? I gave her the sanitized version. Jess had a medical emergency. I took her to the hospital. Her brother got upset. We had a physical altercation. She said, and the nature of the medical emergency? I said, I'd rather not say. It's personal. She said, the online account suggests you put some kind of device on your girlfriend that caused her harm. I didn't answer. She said, we've also received complaints from employees who are uncomfortable working with you based on these reports. I said, who? She said, I can't disclose that. But the company has a zero tolerance policy for violence and for behavior that creates an unsafe work environment. I said, I haven't been violent at work. This was personal. She said, your personal life is affecting your professional reputation and by extension, the company's reputation. We have clients who've seen these posts. This reflects poorly on Data Firm. I said, so you're firing me? She said, we're terminating your employment effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance. Your health insurance will continue through the end of the month. We'll need your badge badge and laptop now. I handed them over. The younger HR guy put them in a box that was already sitting on the table, like they'd prepared for this. Patricia said, we'll mail your personal items from your desk. If there's anything urgent you need, you can coordinate with me via email. I said, can I at least get a reference? She said, we'll confirm your dates of employment if anyone calls. That's all. The meeting lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then I was walking out to my car, unemployed, with a black eye and a restraining order pending. I sat in the parking lot for a while, watched people going in and out of the building, people I'd worked with for 3 years. None of them looked at me. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A man's voice said, this is Detective Morris. We spoke at the station on Saturday. I wanted to let you know the DA has decided to move forward with charges. You'll be receiving a summons in the mail for your arraignment. I said, what are the charges? He said, assault in the 3rd degree. It's a misdemeanor. You'll need to appear in court and enter a plea. I said, what happens if I'm convicted? He said, up to a year in jail, though first offense you'd likely get probation, but you'll have a criminal record. I said, for a misdemeanor? He said, assault is assault. The summons should arrive within a week. Make sure you appear. If you don't, they'll issue a warrant. He hung up. I drove back to my parents' house. My mom was in the kitchen making lunch. She said, how did it go? I said, I got fired. She stopped cutting vegetables. Oh, honey. I said, and I'm being charged with assault. I have to go to court. She put the knife down, came over and hugged me. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. She said, we'll figure this out. We'll get you a lawyer. I said, I don't have money for a lawyer. I just lost my job. She said, we'll figure it out. That night at dinner, my dad said, your mother says you're being charged. I said, yeah. Assault, 3rd degree. It's a misdemeanor. He said, are you going to fight it? I said, I don't know. I did what they're saying I did. I shocked her. I just didn't mean for it to be that bad. He said, intent matters in court. I said, the detective said it doesn't. My dad was quiet for a minute. Then he said, I know a lawyer. Guy I used to work with. His son does criminal defense. I'll reach out. I said, no, you don't have to do that. He said, yes, I do. You're my son. Even when you do stupid things. It wasn't exactly forgiveness, but it was something. The lawyer's name was Keith. Young guy, maybe early 30s. We met at a coffee shop near my parents' house. I told him everything, the whole story. He took notes, didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, okay, here's the situation. The assault charge is going to be tough to fight because you did objectively cause her harm. The question is whether we can argue down to a lesser charge or get you a deal with no jail time. I said, what kind of deal? He said, probably a guilty plea in exchange for probation, community service, maybe anger management classes. I said, I don't have anger management issues. He said, you got in a fist fight at a hospital. The DA is going to argue you do. I said, her brother attacked me. He said, after you put a shock collar on his sister. Any jury is going to side with him. I didn't have a response to that. He said, there's also the restraining order. That hearing is separate. Jess's lawyer will argue you're a danger to her. Given what happened, the judge will probably grant it. I said, for how long? He said, could be a year, could be longer. You won't be able to contact her, go near her home or workplace, or be within a certain distance of her in public. I said, what if I run into her accidentally? He said, you leave immediately. If you don't, you can be arrested for violating the order. This was my life now. Criminal charges, a restraining order, no job, living with my parents. Keith said, I'm going to be straight with you. This is bad. Not worst case scenario bad, but bad. Your best option is to take whatever deal the DA offers, do your probation without incident, and try to rebuild your life. I said, well, what about my record? Will this show up on background checks? He said, yes. Misdemeanor assault will show up. It'll make finding work harder, but it's not a felony. You're not a registered sex offender. You'll be able to move on eventually. Eventually. That word felt very far away. The restraining order hearing was the following week. Keith went with me. Jess was there with her lawyer, a sharp-looking woman in her 50s. Marcus was there too, in the gallery, staring at me the whole time. I didn't look at Jess. Keith had told me not to. Any eye contact could be interpreted as intimidation. Jess's lawyer presented the case, read a statement from Jess describing what happened, how scared she was, how violated she felt, how she didn't feel safe knowing I was out there. The judge, an older man with gray hair, listened without expression. Then Keith presented our side, argued that I had no history of violence, that this was an isolated incident born from a misunderstanding about a product, that I posed no ongoing threat. The judge asked me directly, do you understand why Miss Chen is afraid of you? I said, yes, Your Honor. He said, do you intend to contact her or approach her? I said, no, Your Honor. He said, good. I'm granting the restraining order for a period of 2 years. You are not to contact Miss Chen in any way, directly or indirectly. You are not to come within 500 feet of her residence, her workplace, or any location where you know she will be. Do you understand? I said, yes, Your Honor. He banged the gavel. It was done. On the way out, I made the mistake of glancing over at Jess. She looked different, thinner, tired. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying. She saw me looking and immediately looked away. Put her hand on her lawyer's arm like she needed support, Marcus mouthed. Something at me. Couldn't tell what it was, but it definitely wasn't friendly. Outside the courthouse, Keith said, that went about as well as it could have. I said, 2 years. He said, better than 5. Now we focus on the criminal case. Your arraignment is in 3 weeks. The DA will probably offer a deal before then. I'll let you know what they say. Over the next few weeks, I tried to figure out my life. I applied to dozens of jobs, got rejected from all of them. Most didn't even respond. The ones that did gave generic "we've decided to move in another direction" emails. I knew why. My name was still all over Reddit. Anyone Googling me would find the post, and even without that, there was a gap in my employment history that I'd have to explain. I started doing gig work, DoorDash, Uber Eats, stuff like that. Made enough to pay my parents some rent and cover my phone bill. My social life was non-existent. Tyler stopped responding to my messages. Other friends from college either ghosted me or sent awkward, "Hey man, I heard what happened, hope you're doing okay" texts that clearly meant please don't involve me in this. My parents were supportive, but there was this tension in the house, like they were waiting for me to either fix myself or move out. One night, about a month after the hospital incident, I was scrolling Instagram and I saw that Jess had posted. It was the first time I'd seen anything from her since everything happened. I know I shouldn't have looked. I was violating the spirit of the restraining order, even if not the letter of it, but I couldn't help it. it. The post was a selfie with Claire and some other friends. They were at a bar, smiling, drinks in hand. The caption said, "Grateful for these humans. Learning that joy is a choice and I'm choosing it every day." She looked happy, genuinely happy. And I felt this wave of something I couldn't quite name. Relief that she was okay. Jealousy that she'd moved on. Guilt that I'd hurt her badly enough that joy is a choice was something she had to remind herself of. I closed Instagram, deleted the app. I didn't need to be checking on her. That wasn't healthy for either of us. The DA's offer came through Keith 2 weeks later. Plead guilty to assault in the 3rd degree, 6 months probation, 100 hours of community service, and mandatory therapy with a focus on relationship dynamics and boundaries. Keith said, "This is a good deal. No jail time. After probation, you can petition to have it reduced or sealed." I said, "And if I don't take it?" He said, "We go to trial, which you will lose, and the judge will probably give you jail time just for wasting the court's time." I said, "How much jail time?" He said, "It could be up to a year. But even if it's just a few months, you'll have a conviction and you'll have been in jail. This deal is much better." I took the deal. The arraignment was quick. I stood in front of the judge, pled guilty, got sentenced. The judge gave me a lecture about respecting women and understanding consent, told me that if I violated probation, I'd serve the full year in jail. I said, "Yes, Your Honor." And that was it. I was a convicted criminal. Keith said, "You did the right thing. Now you just have to get through the next 6 months without screwing up." Community service started the following week. I got assigned to a food bank, sorting donations and packing boxes. It was actually kind of nice. Physical work, no one asked me questions, and I was helping people who needed it. The therapy was harder. My therapist was a woman in her 50s named Dr. Huang. She specialized in abusive relationships and court-mandated counseling. First session, she said, "Tell me why you're here." I said, "I'm court-mandated." She said, "I know that. I'm asking why you think you're here." I said, "I made a mistake with my girlfriend, ex-girlfriend." She said, "What kind of mistake?" I told her the story, the whole thing. She listened, taking notes occasionally, her face neutral. When I finished, she said, "Do you understand what you did wrong?" I said, "I hurt her. I didn't mean to, but I did." She said, "That's part of it. But do you understand the deeper issue?" I said, "I treated her like an experiment instead of a person." She said, "You removed her autonomy. You made decisions about her body, her behavior, her feelings without her knowledge or consent. That's not a mistake. That's abuse." I said, "I wasn't trying to abuse her." She said, Abuse isn't defined by what you meant to do. It's about what you actually did. You impacted her in a way that made her fear for her safety. That's abuse. I didn't want to accept that." But sitting there in her office, I couldn't really argue. She said, "Over the next several months, we're going to work on understanding why you thought this was acceptable. What in your background made you think treating a human being like a dog was a reasonable approach to relationship problems?" I said, "It wasn't like that." She said, "It was exactly like that. And until you can acknowledge that, you're not going to grow from this." Sessions with Dr. Huang were brutal. She didn't let me get away with anything. Every time I tried to rationalize or minimize what I'd done, she called me on it. She made me read books about consent, about emotional abuse, about power dynamics in relationships. She made me write letters to Jess that I'd never send, apologizing and taking full responsibility. She made me confront the fact that I'd used the guise of science and psychology to justify controlling another person. It sucked. But it was also the first time I started to actually understand what I'd done. Around week 8 of therapy, Dr. Huang said, "I want to talk about your relationship with your dog." I said, "Maple? What about her?" She said, "You've mentioned multiple times that you love your dog more than you've loved most people. Why do you think that is?" I said, "Dogs are uncomplicated. They just love you. They don't have expectations or demands." She said, "They also don't challenge you. They don't require emotional vulnerability. They don't ask you to grow." I said, "I guess." She said, "You chose a relationship model with Jess that replicated your relationship with your dog because it felt safe. You could control the inputs and predict the outputs. But humans aren't dogs. Humans have autonomy and complexity. And when you tried to simplify her into something you could control, you dehumanized her." I said, "I didn't mean to dehumanize her." She said, "But you did. And you have to sit with that." I sat with it. It was around this time that I found out Jess was seeing someone new. I didn't go looking for this information. My mom ran into Jess's mom at the grocery store. They'd always been friendly. Jess's mom apparently mentioned that Jess was doing well, had started dating again, seemed really happy. My mom told me this gently like she was breaking bad news. I said, "That's good. I'm glad she's happy." My mom said, "Are you though?" I said, "I don't know. I want her to be happy, but it's also kind of hard to hear." My mom said, "That's normal. You loved her." I said, "I did. I just didn't know how to show it in a way that wasn't messed up." My mom said, "You're figuring it out now. That's what matters." But honestly, I wasn't sure I was figuring anything out. I was just going through the motions. Probation check-ins, therapy sessions, community service, gig work to pay the bills, living in my childhood bedroom. I felt stuck, like my life had been paused and everyone else's had kept going. One night I was doing a late DoorDash delivery and I saw them, Jess and her new boyfriend. They were walking out of a restaurant holding hands, laughing about something. I was in my car waiting at a red light. They walked right past me, didn't see me. Her boyfriend was taller than me, better looking probably. He opened the car door for her. She smiled at him the way she used to smile at me. The light turned green. I drove away. I called Keith the next day. I said, "I saw Jess with someone. Am I allowed to be in the same area as her if it's accidental?" He said, "As long as you don't approach her or try to interact, yes. But if she sees you and feels uncomfortable, she can report it. So my advice is to avoid places where you know she might be." I said, "The city's not that big." He said, "I know, but you have to be careful. One violation of the restraining order and you go to jail." I was careful. I stopped going to places I knew she liked, stopped going to our old favorite restaurants, even switched grocery stores. It felt like I was living as a ghost in my own city, haunting the edges of my old life but not allowed to actually be part of it. Around month 4 of probation, something shifted in therapy. Dr. Huang said, "You've been doing the work. I can see you starting to understand the gravity of what happened. But I want to ask you something. What do you think you lost?" I said, "Jess, my relationship." She said, "What else?" I said, "My job, my apartment, my friends, my reputation." She said, "What else?" I didn't know what she was getting at. She said, "You You lost your sense of being a good person. You lost your ability to trust your own judgment. You lost the story you told yourself about who you are. And that hit me because she was right. I'd always thought of myself as a good guy. Logical, yes. A little emotionally stunted, sure. But fundamentally decent. Someone who would never intentionally hurt anyone. And then I did. I intentionally hurt someone I loved. And I'd rationalized it so thoroughly that I didn't even see it as wrong until it blew up in my face. I said, so how do I get that back? She said, you don't. You can't go back to being the person you thought you were. That person didn't actually exist. He was someone who prioritized comfort and control over genuine connection. You have to become someone new. Someone who understands that love isn't about making things easier for yourself. It's about showing up for another person's full humanity, even when it's uncomfortable. I said, I don't know how to do that. She said, that's okay. You're learning. I thought about that a lot over the next few weeks. I was delivering food one night, late shift, mostly going to college kids ordering late night pizza. I dropped off an order at this apartment complex, and on my way back to my car, I saw this couple arguing in the parking lot. The guy was standing really close to the girl, pointing his finger in her face. She was crying, backing away. He kept advancing. I stopped. Every instinct told me to keep walking. Not my business. Don't get involved. I was on probation for assault. The last thing I needed was to insert myself into someone else's domestic situation, but I couldn't because I'd been that guy. Not physically aggressive, but controlling in my own way, and no one had stopped me. I walked over, said, hey, is everything okay here? The guy turned to me, mind your own business. I said, I'm just checking if she's okay. The girl said, I'm fine. Please go. But she didn't look fine. She looked scared. The guy said, she said she's fine. Leave. I said to the girl, do you need a ride somewhere? I can call someone for you. The guy stepped toward me. Dude, I'm not going to tell you again. I should have walked away, but I didn't. I said, I'm not leaving until I know she's safe. He shoved me. Not hard, but enough that I had to step back. I didn't shove back. I just held up my hands and said, I don't want to fight. I just want to make sure she's okay. A door opened in one of the apartments. A woman yelled, I called the cops. They're on their way. The guy grabbed the girl's arm. We're leaving. She pulled away from him, ran toward the woman who'd opened the door. The guy looked at me, then at the girl, then just left. Got in his car and drove off. The cops showed up about 5 minutes later. Took statements from everyone. I told them what I'd seen. The girl, her name was Amy, said he was her ex, that he'd shown up drunk and wouldn't leave. One of the cops asked me, you live here? I said, no, I was just delivering food. He said, good thing you stopped. Who knows what would have happened. After they left, Amy came over to me. She said, thank you. You didn't have to do that. I said, yeah, I did. She said, most people would have just kept walking. I said, I used to be most people, trying to be better. I drove home thinking about that, about how easy it would have been to walk away, how I would have walked away 6 months ago because it wasn't my problem. But I learned something from all of this. I learned that when you see someone being hurt, you don't get to pretend it's not your problem. You don't get to rationalize that it's complicated or that you don't have the full story. You just have to act. The next session with Dr. Huang, I told her about it. She said, that's growth. You intervened to protect someone, not to control them. You gave her a choice instead of making the choice for her. I said, I almost walked away. She said, but you didn't. That's what matters. I said, I still don't know how to have a healthy relationship. I don't know how to be vulnerable with someone without trying to control the outcome. She said, you're not ready for a relationship yet. You have more work to do on yourself, but you're asking the right questions now. That's the first step. My probation ended last week, 6 months completed without incident. 100 hours of community service, done. Therapy sessions ongoing, but no longer mandated. Keith said I could petition to have the conviction sealed in a few years if I stay out of trouble. I'm still living with my parents, still doing gig work, still trying to figure out what's next. I saw on Instagram, yeah, I re-downloaded it, probably shouldn't have, that Jess got engaged. To the guy I saw her with, there was a photo of her showing off a ring surrounded by friends, looking happier than I'd ever seen her. I stared at that photo for a long time, and I realized I felt genuinely happy for her. Not in a, I'm pretending to be okay with this way, actually happy. She found someone who treats her right, someone who doesn't need a manual or a system to show her love, someone who just does it. That's what she deserved all along. I'm not that person yet, maybe I never will be, but I'm trying to figure out how to become someone who could be. Dr. Huang asked me last session, what do you want? I said, I want to not be the guy who put a shock collar on his girlfriend. She said, you'll always be that guy. That's part of your history now. The question is, who else are you going to be? I don't have an answer yet, but I'm working on it. So that's the update. I'm alive, I'm out of legal trouble, I'm trying to be better, and Jess is happy, which honestly is all that really matters. Update, part 3. It's been 2 years since the hospital. I wasn't going to write another update, but some things happened that I need to get out. I don't live with my parents anymore. Got a roommate situation, nothing fancy. I'm doing IT support for a small nonprofit. Basically, I'm the guy who fixes printers. The boss, Paul, he's in his 60s. I told him up front about my record. He said, what did you do? I said, I hurt my girlfriend. Got charged with assault? He said, you do it again? I said, no. He said, good enough. Printer's been broken for 3 weeks. That was it. No lecture. Just gave me a shot. I'm still in therapy. Different guy now. His name's Robert. We talk about my childhood, why I defaulted to systems instead of emotions, all that. I'm also in group therapy with other people who've done relationship stuff, assault, stalking, harassment. It's brutal, but helpful. There's this guy, Mike, who strangled his wife. Did jail time. After one session, he said to me, you know what the hardest part is? Accepting that you're the villain in someone else's story. You don't get to change that narrative. So what do? You just try to be someone different in the next story. About a year after my last update, the restraining order expired. I could technically contact Jess now. I didn't. What would I even say? Robert said that was growth. Old me would have seen it as permission to reach out. New me understands closure isn't something you get from the person you hurt. Then about 3 weeks ago, I got a letter. No return address. It said, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Please don't contact me. But I wanted you to know. I called Robert immediately. Emergency session. I said, I want to respond. I want to thank her. He said, her forgiveness isn't for you. It's for her. Responding would make it about you again. Don't do that. that. So I didn't. I put the letter in a drawer. I've been volunteering at the food bank still. That's where I met Sarah. She's a teacher. We started talking, getting coffee after shifts. One day she asked why I volunteered so consistently. I told her the truth, court mandated service that I kept doing after because it made me feel useful. She asked what the service was for. I said, I hurt my ex-girlfriend. Got charged with assault. She was quiet. Then she said her ex-husband used to hit her. She left and moved across the country. After that, we kept talking. Eventually, she asked if I wanted to get dinner. I said, I don't know if I'm ready for that. She said, how about just dinner and we'll figure out the rest later. We've been seeing each other for 4 months now, taking it slow. Last month, she asked about my scar. The one from when Marcus and I fought. I told her everything. The PUA course, the conditioning, the treats, the clicker, the shock collar, all of it. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, that's really messed up. I said, I know. If you want to stop seeing me, I get it. She said, did you learn from it? I said, well, I'm trying to. She thought about it. Then she said, I need time to process this. She didn't call for a week. Then she texted, can we talk? We met at a park. She said, I talked to my therapist. I believe you've changed, or you're trying to, and I think trying matters. She said she wanted to keep seeing me, but I had to be completely honest, always. No systems, no techniques, just honesty. I said, I can do that. She said, and if I ever feel like you're manipulating me, I'm gone. No second chances. I said, that's fair. Last week she met Maple. They played in the yard for an hour. Afterwards she kissed me. First real kiss. It felt natural, not calculated or timed. Just two people who liked each other. So that's where I am now. 2 years after the worst night of my life. I'm not fixed, I'm not redeemed, but I'm different. I have a job, an apartment, a friend in Tyler who started talking to me again, a potential relationship with Sarah, a therapist who helps, a volunteer position. It's not the life I thought I'd have at 27, but it's a life. Jess is married, happy, and I'm genuinely glad for that. I don't deserve forgiveness from her, but I'm trying to forgive myself enough to keep moving forward. Some days I succeed, some days I don't, but I keep trying. Yesterday was the 2-year anniversary. I drove past the hospital, sat across the street and just looked at it, thought about who I was that night and who I am now. I'm not that person anymore. I don't know if I'm better, but I'm different, and maybe that's enough. I trained my girlfriend like a dog. I hurt her. I faced consequences. I'm trying to be better. There's no neat ending, just slow, painful progress, but I'm still here, still. Trying last night, I was lying in bed and I pulled up my old notes from 2 years ago. The last entry said, system working perfectly, ready to implement negative reinforcement protocols. I deleted the whole thing, created a new note, titled it, Things I'm Learning. Wrote down, you can't optimize human connection. Control is not the same as love. People aren't problems to solve. I'm trying, and that has to be enough. Maple hopped up on the bed and curled up against me. I said, you know I messed up bad, right, girl? She wagged her tail, and I thought, that's the difference. Maple loves unconditionally because dogs don't have conditions, but people do, and they should. Jess didn't owe me unconditional love. Sarah doesn't owe me unconditional trust. Everyone has the right to decide if I'm worth the risk, and I have to be okay with that. Okay with earning trust instead of manufacturing it. It's scarier this way, less controllable, but it's real. My phone buzzed, text from Sarah. Thanks for today. You're good company even when you're quiet. I wrote back, thanks for being patient with me. Tomorrow I'll wake up and go to work and maybe see Sarah and keep trying. And the day after that, I'll try again. Maybe all that trying will add up to something resembling a life worth living. Or maybe I'll always be the guy who put a shock collar on his girlfriend. But at least I'm trying. At least I'm different than I was. And like everyone keeps telling me, that has to be enough because it's all I've got. So that's it, the whole story. I don't have a moral, I don't have wisdom, just what happened and what I'm doing about it. If you take anything from this, don't treat people like problems to solve. Don't prioritize your comfort over their humanity. And when you mess up, own it, face it, do the work, not for redemption, just because it's the right thing to do. I'm done now. Going to watch TV with my dog. Maybe I'll text Sarah about breakfast tomorrow. No system, no technique, just a text from one person to another. Wish me luck. Thanks for going on this journey with me. I do read every single comment, so tell me what you think, and if you have your own story, submit it through the link in the description.